Southeast Asia, a creature once common in the jungle is nowhere to be found. The Sumatran rhino. Despite being the oldest and most distinct rhino species, with as few as 30 individuals left, they are the most endangered large animal on Earth, with the IUCN estimating a 90% chance of extinction by the end of the century. But how did this animal end up on the brink of extinction? To find out, we have to go back a really long time. In fact, rhinos first appeared 50 million years ago, diverging from a common ancestor with horses. Even though they have two horns like African rhinos, their closest relatives are the Indian and Javan rhinos. It is also the closest living relative of the woolly rhino, which split off nearly 10 million years ago. But as you know, woolly rhinos went extinct with the end of the last ice age. Two other rhinos from the same genus as the Sumatran rhino have been discovered. One from the early Pleistocene of southern China, and another from Burma, believed to be the Sumatran rhino's ancestor, which ultimately came to replace it. During the ice ages, the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Borneo, and Java formed a single landmass known as Sundaland, allowing the animals to spread across the islands. Two studies using DNA to estimate their historic populations have been completed so far. The first study estimated a peak population of 58,000, around a million years ago, declining to just 500 by the end of the ice age. As sea levels rose, much of their habitat was destroyed, fragmenting their populations. This study was later criticized for excluding DNA from extinct mainland populations, limiting its findings to Sumatra. The second study analyzed complete mitochondrial genomes from rhinos across their former range. It found a stable population of about 40,000 over the last 400,000 years, followed by a decline beginning 25,000 years ago. But the story of why they are on the brink today begins in 1793, when the first documented encounter with a Sumatran rhinoceros ended with a gunshot. The animal was killed 16 kilometers inland from Sumatra's western coast. A detailed written description and scientific drawings of the rhinoceros were quickly sent to London, marking the beginning of the West's knowledge of the species. Yet this mysterious creature was unlike any the world had ever seen before. Not only is it the smallest of all rhino species, but it's the only one covered in a coat of hair, a characteristic linking it to the woolly rhino. But why does the Sumatran rhino have such distinctive features, and how do they help it survive in its jungle home? Its hair keeps mud stuck to its body, cooling it down, and its smaller size allows it to climb steep slopes in dense forest. But like all rhinos, it has one critical weakness: terrible eyesight, which causes them to rely on their sharp sense of smell to guide their way through the wilderness. Despite its name, the Sumatran rhino once roamed far beyond the island. The northern subspecies roamed the land north of Malaysia, reaching as far as China's Yellow River Valley as recently as 1000 BC. But by 900 AD, records already noted its disappearance from northern China, but eventually became restricted to just Sichuan and Yunnan. But the rhinos were not safe in these regions. The 17th century saw the species vanish from Sichuan, and the final sightings in Yunnan came in the early 1900s, which marked the extinction of all three Asian rhinos from China. Northeast India's forested hills provided refuge for Sumatran rhinos, allowing them to survive longer than in China. They were believed to have disappeared in the 1960s. However, in the remote hills along India's border with Burma, the rhinos were seen frequently by locals up into the 1990s, which was a greatly missed conservation opportunity that could have potentially changed the path of the species. Although unlikely, there is a possibility that this subspecies may still be found in Burma, where the subspecies was seen for the last time in 1996. As political instability rages on in the country, it's unlikely that we'll be able to investigate anytime soon. A number of seemingly believable, yet unconfirmed records from Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam indicate that the Sumatran rhino also inhabited the Annamite mountain range, though the final sighting in Vietnam was in 1966, and any survivors were likely killed in the war. As of 2024, the Sumatran rhino clings on to survival in just 2 or 3 areas. Rhinos haven't been seen in southwest Sumatra since 2014, after a road was built through the middle of their forest. Declared extinct in Borneo since the 1980s, signs of rhino activity were confirmed by a camera trap in 2013. Sadly, by 2016, one was found dead in a poacher's trap, but another was rescued and taken to a sanctuary. No rhinos have been seen in Wakambas National Park since 2019. Despite estimates of 15 to 30 just 5 years ago, these locations lack genetic viability, leaving the mountains of North Sumatra as the species' last hope, with maybe fewer than 30 rhinos remaining. It's not only the final stronghold of the Sumatran rhino, but the Sumatran orangutan, tiger, and elephant. Until fairly recently, the Sumatran rhino also lived in Malaysia, but any conservation efforts were hindered by the complete overestimates of their populations, with estimates of up to 284 as recently as 13 years ago. In reality, there were far fewer left, with the last in Peninsular Malaysia being seen in 2007, and the last in Sabah being seen in 2013. Its favourite habitats, though, are steep valleys with dense undergrowth located near a source of water. Upon the onset of the rainy season, the rhinos retreat to high elevation areas, a habitat that's become increasingly rare over time, as the population of Southeast Asia has increased fourfold since 1950, inevitably causing encroachment on their fragile ecosystems, pushing them to more and more remote areas of jungle. Although being solitary, Sumatran rhinos can have home ranges of over 50 square kilometers, marking their territory by bending sticks into patterns and scraping soil. However, they do not fight over these territories. To stay cool and prevent parasites, they spend on average 2.5 hours a day wallowing in mud wallows, which if they cannot find, they will make their own. Since they evolve without natural predators, they have very few offspring in their lifetime, which makes them even more vulnerable to humans. However, tigers or packs of dholes could potentially take down a calf. Sumatran rhinos and elephants create trails through their habitats that span generations, connecting areas of high food abundance and salt licks. These trails even cross huge rivers with strong currents. They consume a huge amount of food a day, which means they have to spend a lot of time searching for food. Like other species of rhino, their nutrient-poor diet leads them to often visit salt licks, which also serve social purposes, as rhinos can trace each other's scents from there. But perhaps the most interesting feature of the Sumatran rhino is its song. These calls, which can travel up to 10 kilometers in Sumatra's dense jungle, serve an unknown purpose, and we may never find out before they go extinct. Although once an abundant species, their population decline has been catastrophic, with estimates showing a 50% loss per decade in the 1990s. Their strong sense of smell deters them from people, making it nearly impossible for hunters to directly hunt them. Instead, poachers leave out traps, which cause the animals to get stuck and die after weeks of suffering. These traps also harm other wildlife, including Sumatran tigers. Poachers sell these horns to customers in China, where many falsely believe them to have healing properties. This large-scale hunting has fragmented their populations, increasing the risk of inbreeding depression. And as habitats continue to vanish, the future of the Sumatran rhino remains grim. Yet, is there still hope? It became clear that breeding them in captivity was essential to saving the Sumatran rhino. But if taking Sumatran rhinos into captivity has taught us one thing, is that they do not survive well outside of their tropical forest habitat. Unfortunately, many rhinos taken to zoos in the 19th and 20th centuries did not survive, with the last captive individual dying in 1972. Seeing the species drifting closer towards extinction, conservationists devised a plan to save them. Starting in 1984, 40 rhinos were taken from the jungle and shipped to zoos and breeding centers across the world, which was doomed to fail from the start. And since no one had learned from the last time they were in captivity, most of them quickly perished. And by 1996, not a single calf was born, with the project ending that same year. With the vast majority having died without access to their natural food or mud wallows, the project was a terrible failure for such an endangered species. But maybe all this changed when 3 calves were born into the Cincinnati Zoo. Eventually their parents died, and so they were sent to the Waikamba Sanctuary, where they could participate in the breeding program. And since then, 5 calves have been born at the sanctuary. This breeding program is the only fragment of hope left for the Sumatran rhino, and its survival completely depends on it. If you couldn't already tell, I'm not exactly optimistic about the survival of the Sumatran rhino. Despite it being my favourite mammalian species, it would seem as if all the odds are stacked against them, and after surviving millions of years of ice ages, they are set to disappear because of humans. The IUCN states that the chance of extinction in the next 60 years is 90% without successful interventions. Unless we discover a way to breed them more effectively, they will certainly fall into the likes of the dodo and the Tasmanian tiger.